Welcome, dear listeners, to the Speak and Flow podcast, where we dive into unique experiences and strategies to help you and your team achieve maximum potential and flow. I'm so glad you're here. I have an amazing, incredibly smart, and also humble, genuine leader, Jeffrey Yang. He is a Chief Technology Officer for Rising Team. Hi, Jeffrey.
Hi. Thanks for having me, and really excited to be here.
Me too, me too. We're going to dive into some really unique experiences that you've been through so we can learn. But before we get into that, I wanted to have you tell the audience, like, what makes you so passionate about Rising Team? Because they're doing some amazing things.
Yeah, thanks. I think so. What I'd like to start with is the vision of the company, which is that every person in the workplace feels understood, supported, and empowered. And that really resonates with me. I think that if you imagine a world where everyone feels understood, supported, and empowered, that it's a wonderful kind of vision where everyone is happier, they enjoy their jobs, they do better at their jobs. And yeah, so that's kind of the vision I think about and what makes me passionate. It's something that even before I started at Rising Team, it was something I had focused on. And if you think about it, not even the whole world, but like if your whole company felt that way, that would be an amazing place to work. And if even just your team felt that way, that's kind of it's like how great would it be if your whole team understood you and supported you and empowered you? And so, yeah, that's kind of makes me passionate. So every company that we onboard, every team that uses our product makes me feel good.
Oh my gosh, that gave me chills. It really did. That is such a beautiful vision and mission, because a lot of what I do with helping people with finding their voice is so that they can feel, I love the flow of what you said, understood, supported. And so it's just amazing. And I completely agree with that. How much better could this world be when
Yeah.
people are actually enjoying their work? What the statistic is sad about how many people are unhappy at their jobs.
Yeah, exactly. And like when just a little bit of connection and just support, it's I mean we see like data about how much it improves things like retention and engagement and just it's like proof that everyone really needs that.
Yeah, and they're doing it through AI, correct? How's that?
Well, yeah, so what we do is, so we take the team as a unit. So the team, if you think about like who is best equipped to like support you at work and who you want to understand you, it's your manager and your team. It's the people you work with. So the team is kind of like the built-in unit that we impact. And what we do is we have team workshops that you can do with your team. And so if you think about workshops, typically might do them once a year, and it might only be for leadership. And then you kind of they can be really amazing, and you can bond with the people that you do the workshop with, and you share and you do activities together and you practice together. But you do it with people that you don't actually work with. And so if you do it with your team, and then instead of once a year, you do it uh, like you do it consistently, then that is a much better experience in like our opinion. And so then what happens is you have this bonding experience where you over time learn more about your team, learn how to support each other and help each other, and then you do it consistently. And so that's kind of how we work. So yeah, I think, and so we do have an AI component, which is an AI leadership coach that kind of takes the things that you've learned about your team and helps you kind of understand them better. And for example, like you might learn that different people appreciate things different ways, right? Or like to be appreciated different ways.
Right.
So for example, somebody might care most about like the impact on the customers. So if you appreciate them, like, oh, your project did really well and like everyone loved it, like who uses it, that might be the way to appreciate that person. Another person might be prefer to be appreciated for like how hard they worked. And so you might say something oh, like this project was great, and I noticed you worked really hard on it, and it turned out really well. And so like that's kind of the insights from the workshops that you can use. Um, and the AI leadership coach can help you say sort of like, oh, I'd like to appreciate Melinda, and how does that like what's the best way to kind of appreciate her for this project that I'd like to appreciate her for. So
Right.
that's kind of what we do.
That is great. I use ChatGPT and I get so many wonderful ideas from there. And it's so nice to have a personalized coach to be able to have the right words or the right ideas to appreciate different, because how am I going to know how to appreciate somebody else if first I don't know how they want to be appreciated, and two, that's not the way I like to be appreciated. Right.
Yeah,
And
it's
so it's,
hard. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like almost
Like,
like learning a different language in terms of valuing and appreciating others, which I think, like you said, builds a more cohesive team, and people feel valued, people are motivated, and they're enjoying their work. So,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
as the chief technology officer, it sounds incredibly busy. Do you, do you have a lot of things going on? It's been in business for close to 4 years now, rising team.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I like to keep it manageable. So I think that's one of the things I focus on is prioritizing. And like there's always an infinite amount of work to do. So prioritizing is really important in terms of figuring out like what's the most effective thing to do right now.
And how do you prioritize it if a new priority comes in, and then what happens to all the old priorities? Like, how do you do
Yeah.
that, balance that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to evaluate it and decide. And
Yeah.
there's multiple ways of doing that. But I think a lot of it is just communication with stakeholders and just being upfront. Like, yeah, like we can't do everything. We have to acknowledge that. And that's the truth of everything um, at work. And you we need to decide like what's the most important.
Mhm. Have you always had this skill set or mindset of balancing the priorities? And even when way back when you started your career, what was that like? Did you work really hard or not work really hard? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah. Um, I think, well, so when I started, I did kind of have this skill set of not overworking, kind of. I mean,
That's
I
like so
basically,
different. Uh-huh.
yeah,
You just born
yeah.
with it? Or did you watch your parents work to, like, where do you know what was the switch? Maybe was it from your parents
Um,
working too hard, or I'm
it
curious.
was, I mean, I think I was very passive, right? And I think I mean, there were multiple reasons. I don't think, I mean, I had a pretty sheltered childhood. I had, like, my parents did a lot for me, which meant in many cases I didn't really develop the skills necessarily to do a lot for myself. And and so what ended up happening was I was more of a like tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Right,
And
right.
I'll do a good job of it.
Mhm,
But that's it. I'm done, right? You tell me what to do and I'll do it and I'm done. And I just got really efficient at just doing what other people told me to do. And like part of that is like go to college, get a job,
mhm,
um, so on. And so like my first job, for example, I worked 4 hour days. I was a full-time software engineer, but I worked 4 hour days because I would roll in at 11 and eat lunch and then like do some work and I would get everything done and then I'd be out around 4, go play sports. It was a pretty fun time. And I remember my manager called me in and he was like, "Oh, Jeff, you could work more hours." And I was like, "Well, okay, yeah, I could. Is there something like you wanted me to do that I'm not doing? And
Mhm.
he said, no, but it might be good for your career.
Mhm.
And I was like, I thought about it and I said, no, thanks. Like, I don't know. Like, I didn't really feel like career was this tangible thing that I should be working on, or, so it's just kind of like, well, you didn't tell me to do my career. Like, so I'm not going to do it. Right. Um, and so that's kind of where I was for a really long time, actually, until I was at Hulu, and my manager there, his name was Arash, and he actually believed in me and kind of pushed me. And he said, like, I want you to be the manager after me. Like, you know a lot and you know what you're doing. But there's one thing you have to stop doing is stop asking me questions. Uh,
Mm.
and basically the reason for that is I had gotten to this state where I would ask for permission for anything because I
Mhm.
wanted, it was kind of my way of not taking responsibility, right? It's
Mhm.
like if you give me permission to do it, that means it's on you, like whatever happens.
Mhm.
And so, and this was really hard for me to get around because actually taking accountability and responsibility was something that I wasn't used to. And I even remember he'd be like, Jeff, stop asking me questions. And I would say, okay, I'm not asking you questions anymore. I'm done with that. And then 30 seconds later, I'd be asking him a question, like, and he'd say, Jeff, like you're doing it again. And so so what happened was he really empowered me, and I'll always be grateful to him for that. And I did become the manager of that team. And that was when I started to take responsibility, but also I started to realize that I do care about things at work. Like before, I just thought, okay, I don't care. Just tell me what to do. I do it. But now I'm like, oh, there's people on my team who I'm responsible for, and I care about them, and I care about their growth. I care about understanding, supporting, and empowering them.
Mhm.
And that led me to actually start trying and like start growing and actually yeah, that kind of finding my passion like just kind of triggered an avalanche where my career started taking off and I started focusing on I'm just helping people on my teams and helping them be happy and successful.
Well, that
Totally.
strategy
Yeah, yeah.
worked. That
Sorry, what was
strategy
that?
seemed to work because so with the passion, you're able to find the passion. You started caring more, is what I'm
Yeah,
hearing.
yeah,
Caring about what it is that you're doing, but more so caring about the people that you're working with, your team, taking responsibility for them. And that strategy helped grow your career. And then you ended up at Facebook.
yep, yep.
And then did you work hard the whole time or are you still working? I'm curious about the hours by chance.
Yeah, it's a good question. My hours did increase, right, over
Uh-huh.
time. I've never been somebody, I've been relatively good with hours. So I
Yeah.
don't work more than 8 hours. Um,
Yay! I love it.
yeah,
I love it. No,
yeah,
and the reason why is as entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. And there's like, and with anybody, I mean, I think we're all on this trajectory. I feel like in America, we're like, there's more to do. There's more to do, or we want, if we don't do XYZ, we're not going to get the promotion. Or if I don't do XYZ, I'm not going to get the right client. And I think that's the perception, an unhealthy perception, because I don't, but I think that I cap it and I trust that what I did, as long as they're the right strategic, right actions, it will come back tenfold.
yeah.
It does sometimes take longer than I wish to, but then it's also, I also, like you, I feel like I like to keep my mindset. I try to balance other things in my life and other priorities too. And do you think that's the case for you?
Yeah, it's I mean it's a slippery slope to just tr tackling problems by adding more time is a slippery
Right.
slope, right? It's like you you could always add more time. Yeah, that's kind of like the easy way out in many ways. But the better way is to find out ways to be more efficient and more effective and figure out what's actually important. There's so many times where I could, an example is I batch my kind of messaging and Slack and email because a lot of times it's not urgent when somebody messages you. And if you just wait a little bit, they usually figure it out
Mhm.
themselves. Or
Totally.
so it's
Right.
um it's something where you can find ways to manage your time and what's another hour or two either way, right? So
Mhm.
why not go do an hour less?
Mm-hmm. And then it's so true, batching things and holding the line of trying not to let other things that you're supposed to do. I find, right? Like, okay, 1 hour less here or 1 hour less there, but as long as I'm batching it and then committing to what I'm supposed to be doing, I think that's been very helpful too. Sounds like
Yeah,
that's
and I think like another thing people find is that there's this stuck of like a binary thinking of where it's like I either spend time or I I can't get it done, right? And
right, right.
it's there's a way to say, actually, how can I get it done and spend less time?
Yeah, I like that question. How can I get it done and spend less time?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Good question. And so it sounds like you made it to Facebook. And as a manager at Facebook, what are some of the things that you learned at Facebook standing up for your team?
Yeah, I think there was a so I was building several teams at Facebook, and it was great, and I learned a lot in terms of first of all just aligning people with the like aligning both what I wanted, what the company wanted, and what they wanted. And
Mm-hmm.
so like I found that that was a very powerful motivator if what an individual wants is what they're working on. So, so if they want to get promoted and you kind of line up the cards that way and you say, hey, like this is how you can get promoted and it would be helpful to me and the company, then if everything is aligned, then it all works well together. So a lot of my job I felt like was setting things up like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one particular lesson I learned at Facebook as well, and which you mentioned, which uh, historically I never, I had a hard time standing up for myself, and it's not something I typically do, and so yeah, so I let me tell the story from with some context.
Okay.
So the to start what we let's see, I started a team that was tasked, it was a new team. It was tasked with finding new ways to grow Facebook groups. I was working on Facebook groups at the time. And the trick was, so in terms of growing, what I mean by that is we had a top line metric, which is the number of people who find groups meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the metric for every team in Facebook groups. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were tasked with finding a new way. And so and so every other team, like they had their plans and they knew like, okay, this is how we want to grow Facebook groups, and they executed on that. And what we had to do was basically find all the stuff they didn't want to do and all the stuff that they felt like wasn't worth it. And so we basically took every single one of those and we tried it. We tried every single item that we could find. Um, and and it was like that was a real roller coaster because at first we were like, oh, this seems impossible. Like, how are we gonna find stuff that like nobody else wants to do and make it like worthwhile? And then we found some items that were promising, but then we realized why nobody wanted to work on it because we got all these blockers and people like other teams stopping us. So we really struggled, and it was uh, basically we had at the weeks were ticking down, and we had these like three really promising projects I remember, that were not launched yet, but were blocked for various reasons. Like, for example, one was a team that had, they basically said, you can't launch this because it uses too much CPU.
Mhm.
And we were like, okay, we scrambled. We're like, what do we do? How do we get past this? We found another engineer who was working on reducing CPU, and we worked with them. So we actually reduced like millions of dollars in CPU just so we could use some of that in our project.
Oh, that's funny.
So that's actually another learning that like a lot of it was like it's kind of like negotiating and like it's also with the alignment thing, right? How can we get the other teams on board with us, right? And we did that by helping the other teams get their goals so
Mhm.
that they could help us get our goals.
Mhm.
And but yeah, it was really like tense because like we ended up launching them like right at the end and it was really big and we celebrated. We were so happy. It was like I mean, we felt super victorious that we had like felt like we conquered the impossible.
Wow.
Um, and then, uh, yeah, and we actually got more of the metric than any of the other teams who had already had all their plans and figured everything out.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think so at Facebook there's like a rating system.
Yeah.
There's meets all expectations, which is kind of like the neutral, like you met expectations. Then there's exceeds expectations, and then there's greatly exceeds expectations.
Uh-huh.
So everyone on our team was like, "Oh, we definitely greatly exceeded expectations. Like
Uh-huh.
this was like an amazing victory." And then my manager, or we had a new manager, and he talked to me and he said, "Hey Jeff, like I talked to everyone on your team, and you know, they were all like super proud of what you did last half, and they felt like you did an amazing job." And but then I got the rating for your team, and it's actually meets all expectations plus, which is kind of their way of saying like, oh, it's meets expectations, it's not exceeds, but we'll give you like a bonus. It's like a plus, right? But
Right.
it's pretty much equivalent to a meets all expectations. And I remember telling my team, and I remember the expressions on their faces, and it was what they were stunned at
Right.
first.
Right.
And then there was this feeling of like total betrayal
Right.
and disillusionment,
Right.
and like people wanted to leave. Um, and so it was really terrible. And I got angry. I felt really angry,
Mhm.
and I said, "This isn't right." And I asked all of the leads of groups, and I asked for the head of groups, Jen, to be there as well. And I want to hear what they had to say, and I wanted them to hear what I had to say.
Mhm.
Um, and even that was it was tricky because people, first, you know, one person had removed the head of groups because they're like, oh, well, they're not involved in this decision, so it doesn't matter. And I was like, no, she has to be there. And another, like some other people were like, Jeff, are you sure you want to do this? You know, you're doing well. Why risk your career over this one thing, right?
Wow.
And I, I was so angry. I feel like I had to do it. So I think that was an instance where anger actually helped me.
Yes.
Um, and I basically I forced the meeting to get together, and we they kind of told me what what was the reason we got the rating. And then I stood up and I started talking. And the first thing I said is I am pissed about this rating, and it's wrong. And I kind of explained everything I had said before, and I did it in a way like I practiced ahead of time, and I did it in a way that was really respectful.
Uh-huh.
And I said, I know, yeah, I know, like it's not easy to determine the rating, and like you did the best you could, and this is the rating you came up with, and at the same time, it's wrong. And you know, and part of that is my fault, right? I admitted it's like I could have explained how difficult our path was. I could have done a better job.
Yeah.
of helping that. And because kind of the kind of what happened was people felt like, oh, we were lucky and we found something that was worked really well and it was really easy for us. And it just happened, we just happened to like, instead we like looked through every single thing and we had to, go over so many obstacles. But they didn't know any of that.
You didn't know any of that.
Um, so yeah, I kind of did this really long speech, and I actually ended up crying at the end because I felt like I had failed my team. Um, and to be honest, like my team helped me a lot in doing this because if it was just me who was affected, I probably would never have spoken.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But just seeing everyone on my team be affected by it, I had to do it.
Right.
And then yeah, and then Jen, she did like she was really great at facilitating this. She said like she asked everyone to pause and reflect back what they heard from me.
Oh, good, good,
Um,
good, good. That's powerful.
and yeah, yeah. And they did that and it worked out well. We ended up the team stayed together. We ended up actually growing into 100+ person org because of the impact we had. Um, and Jen, she actually like reversed our ratings. And it was like I'm really grateful for her for that because they told her, you get one of these in your Facebook career, right? And if you want to use it on this team, go ahead. And she's like, I do. So
Wow.
yeah, and that really spoke volumes about her. Um, and yeah, so it really gave me that message that I can be angry, which is not usually acceptable at work.
Uh-huh.
I can speak up
Mm-hmm.
and I can do it in a way that doesn't make things worse.
Mm.
And that's always been like a fear of mine, right? Of like, if you speak up, like
Yeah.
what's going to happen? Like, are you going to damage your career? And in
Right.
fact, it helped my career, right? It helped my career at Facebook. It also helped my career afterwards because I haven't mentioned this, but Jen is actually the founder of Rising Team.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
So yeah, and I have always admired her, and I'm so glad to be working with her at Rising Team. So yeah, that's kind of my story about standing up for myself
Wow, what a
and my team.
powerful story. And what a full circle in terms
Yeah,
of, yes, your growth, development, everywhere from where you are now with rising teams to how you were before in terms of committing to your passion and helping people, and how you then use it to develop your voice, to stand up for your team and to do something incredibly difficult, which is, again, like you said, challenging somebody, putting your emotions out there, but in a way that is helpful, respectful, and just acknowledges what's happening in a very truthful way, but in a way that, again, yeah, helps people. People want to hear it. So you didn't do it in a way where it caused defensiveness or so. That's amazing that you did that. And it sounds like you did practice and you sort of put thought into it versus speaking out of anger without the thought. So you had
yes,
together
yeah,
your, yeah, you knew what you're going to say, but you allowed yourself to be angry. And that's your fuel. And I think that's okay too, because I think powerful leaders are not emotionless. Powerful leaders are human, and that's where storytelling with the emotion, as long as you can gauge, if you're telling the story from a place of strength, even though it's vulnerable, or are you getting angry at somebody? So, or are you venting? Like, there's a lot of different reasons, but your reasoning was to stand up for your team, and
yeah.
you knew that that's what they deserved. And so that is an amazing story that I learned. It's just so inspirational. Yeah. And so I wanted to leave off with what would you like the audience to take away? What is the one golden takeaway? If you could share one or two statements.
Yeah, I think what I would like them what I would say is, at least in my experience, finding the points of passion in your work and in your life. And it doesn't have to be this like one driving passion that you have, but it can be just finding those can just like boost you. So like for me, finding that I cared about my building my team, and maybe not so much about the work itself or what's getting done, but like what about the development of the people on my team, or
Right.
that the passion about sticking up for my team and feeling like I needed to fix something. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Finding those things, a little burst of passion within your day to day. Our day to day can be so routine sometimes or so overworked. So where are we going to find that boost of passion to fulfill our hearts? And I think that with you being at Rising Team with your amazing leader, Jen, they're lucky to have you. So, and especially with you and your passion in helping people, this is a perfect alignment of the company's vision and your skill set. So, and your
yeah,
leadership.
yeah. It really is perfect. I'm so glad.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey, for your time and sharing your unique experience. I trust that our audience, and I know myself, I learned a lot, and I also trust that the audience got your golden takeaway to propel your leadership and build your teams. Until next time, thank you so much for joining. I'll see you later,
Thank you.
Jeffrey. Thanks for joining the conversation today. Are you curious on how you measure up with your ability to speak in flow? Come grab my free self-assessment at https://speakinflow.com/assessment. And I'll see you on the other side.